Exercise. I want you to think about 3 of the most pressing challenges that you think faces Africa today. And let's narrow it down to Ghana. Think of 3 of the most pressing challenges that we have in Ghana. And then you can just write it down somewhere in your sticky notes, on your phones, because we are going to use this, this information later on. So as I was saying, let's do a quick exercise. I want you to use the next 20 seconds to think about challenges that you think are facing Ghana today. Just 3, narrow it down to 3. I'm sure you could write like a whole book, but let's just narrow it down to 3. So the timer is going to help us do this exercise. So I want you to think about it. I want you to think about it in terms of education, in terms of community, in terms of healthcare. What are the challenges that you think we face today in Ghana that really affects you? Okay, so 19% of the global youth population are in Africa. This translates to around 226 million. I'm sure this is no news because most people know that Africa has the most youthful set of age group. Now, out of these 19% of young people, it is estimated that this forms around 226 million people. Now, what does this mean? This means that Africa has the highest number of young people at the moment. So when you think of the demographics of Africa in itself, out of the 60%, most of them are between the ages of 0 to 25. Now, why am I saying all of this? This should tell you that this is a ticking time bomb. Usually when we go for meetings with policymakers, they tell us that this is something that we can look at in terms of opportunities or challenges. For me, I think it's a positive thing that Africa has a lot of young people. By 2055, it is predicted that this number is not going to remain static. And that is why we need to do something about it. By 2055, it is expected that this would increase by at least 50%. What this means is that now that we have 226 million, by 2055, we are expected to have around 335 million young people. So this presents us with a challenge, or for some would say an opportunity. Now let's look at other interesting statistics. The average age of an African president is 62 years. Now, why am I saying this, or why am I bringing this up? It's because it is interesting that most young people in our continent today average 19.4 years. So if most of us are between the ages of 19.4 years, and we have leaders who have an average of 62 years, isn't there a disconnect? Isn't it problematic that the average age of a young person in Africa today is 19.4 years? But then the average age of our leaders is 62 years. I read further on and realized that when you take 10 of the most advanced economies, which do not have such a youthful demographic as Africa, their leaders average 52 years. So we are talking about Europe, which does not have such a youthful demographic, yet they have younger leaders. So the mean age also of the oldest African president is 80.2 years. The longest serving African president is 80.2 years. When you take 10 of the longest serving, and you strike an average, you get 80.2 years, which is very interesting information. The reason why I try to do a juxtapose of these two statistics is that when you have a continent full of young people who form part of a new generation, some of us say we are the millennials, and then you have leaders that are coming from generations back to make decisions for us, does it even make sense? If you have the average age of leaders being 62 years, that should tell you that they are coming from a generation that had their own problems. But then we have put them there to make decisions for us. And so most of the times when people say Africa in itself is a problematic continent, At times I do agree with them, because if we have so many young people, then why should our decision makers be people who are way older than us, people who do not understand the challenges that we face? So I'm here today to present to you why I think young people should be allowed to take control of our affairs, or how we can leverage on Africa's youthful population. Instead of looking at it as a challenge like others do, for me, I think it's an opportunity. So why young people? The first thing is passion. Young people are very passionate about things. And this can be seen in the rise of social entrepreneurship. Most of us here want to do or want to work in companies that do work which is impactful. I mean, we do want money. Most of us want money to buy things. But you'd realize that most young people are even interested in volunteering in causes. Now that Christmas is coming up, you see so many young people doing donations, visiting orphanages. You don't see old people doing that. That is simply because young people are really passionate about the problems of this world. Also, the next thing we can talk about is that young people have the energy, and this is not something that I'm here to debate on, because it is clear. And in solving Africa's challenges, trust me, you need a lot of energy. Now, let me remind you guys of a time where we saw some of our leaders attend a conference somewhere and they fell asleep. So why did they fall asleep? It's not because they are lazy. It's not because they are not hardworking. It's simply because it's nature. That because they are old, their system has been programmed to shut down when they are over-operating. So if this is the case, why then shouldn't young people be attending these spaces? Why should we take someone to represent us and go and sleep? Another thing about young people is the fact that we are extremely ambitious. Now, if I should ask any young person here in this room, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm going to get a lot of interesting responses. People are going to tell me they want to own the latest Bentleys and Rolls Royces and, have big companies. If I should ask my dad the same question, he'll tell me, Nana, I think in the next 5 years, if you are married, I would be happy. This is to show you the mindset of these different age groups. For us, we are very dreamy. We like to think about crazy things. We are risk takers. And that is simply because of the youthful exuberance. You can't take it away from us. The next thing is that we are extremely creative. And when I say we are creative, it means that we think about problems and come up with creative solutions towards these challenges. I'm sure later on one of the presenters will talk about how he's doing amazing things, converting waste products into furniture. I heard of a group of university students who were able to make sanitary diapers out of plantain. You can even talk about a group of scientists who were able to develop robotic arms that could translate sign language. Now, these are things young people are doing. I can mention so many examples. So our creative approach to tackling issues gives us an edge. And all of these factors make us the most important people, or the first choice solution to tackling Africa's problems. Now, let me share 2 stories. The first one would be my story. So in 2017, I got the opportunity to travel to Kenya to volunteer on a project. Like I said, young people are very passionate about things. So given the fact that I felt a bit comfortable or being in my comfort zone, I decided to take a step and go outside the country to see what I can do to basically help solve some of the world's challenges. Now, when I was in Kenya, this is where I worked. So this is a slum in Kenya called Matari. This is one of the most dangerous slums in Africa. And trust me, when I was going to Kenya, I never thought this was what I was going to meet. I was poised to change the world, but trust me, this was too much for me. Because thinking of the fact that I booked a flight to go help teach in a school, and then I'm presented with this. So as you can see, that is a rubbish or a refuse dump. And that was where the school I was supposed to teach was in. So the first thing we had to do was to clear this refuse dump so that the foul stench that was going to the classroom would be reduced, at least to some extent. Now, the classroom was made with slabs and roofing sheets. I think they're asbestos style. So it was extremely hot for us. So after I was there for 2 months, I started thinking about this. If a young person like myself traveled all the way to Kenya to try to, help and contribute towards the SDGs, specifically quality education, what would happen if other young people decided to take up this decision. Not to say you have to travel all the way to Kenya. For me, maybe I did that because I probably had the means or I just wanted to explore. But what if all of us here, given that we have the energy, we decide to go into one of these classrooms in one of these communities, let's say Jamestown, and then we decide to just take a chalkboard and start teaching? Just imagine if Ghana has a youth population of, let's say, 3 million. If every Friday, some of us who are not employed, we go out there and say, we want to teach, we want to contribute to this. I'm not sure any school would refuse, right? The next story is a story of another good friend of mine called Abdul Zurak. So Abdul Zurak lost a family friend due to cancer. And this really dawned on him, like it put him in the darkest moments. But after some point, he decided to get out of this. And what did he do? He decided to go out there to create awareness about cancer. So he mobilized a group of friends, around 3 of them, and they decided to go to bar stations and public places like markets just to talk to people about cancer. Now, it's been 5 years now, and I'm proud to say that Abdul has been able to engage around 8,000 people physically through his cancer awareness. He started with just 3 people. Currently, he has 90 full-time volunteers. And his work has expanded beyond Accra to 3 other regions. On social media, his online advocacy has been able to engage around 500,000 people. Now we can start thinking of the lives he probably has saved just because he decided to go out there and create awareness about cancer. So what now? Now I want you to start thinking about the challenges that you wrote when I started my talk. I'm sure some of you wrote that there's so much corruption, there's so much waste, there's so much rubbish, and the country is in chaos. But then my call to action is that now that you know the challenges, what are you going to do about it? If you're a young person, and given that you possess all of these skills that I already mentioned, that you possess the passion, you possess the creativity, you possess the ambition, and the interesting thing is that we form the largest group of people in Ghana. Why don't we rise up to leverage on all of these factors or all of these conditions that we have to make the world a better place? While I was working with ISEC, which is the world's largest youth organization, there was one thing I learned, that youth leadership or leadership is the fundamental solution to the world's problems. But then I believe that youth leadership specifically is a faster, a better, and a more creative approach towards solving Africa's problems. And as young people, it is our responsibility to take charge of affairs, to make Africa the dream that we all want to live in. Thank you very much.